Good morning and welcome to the Kyazma Business Consulting Ask the Admin Weekly Training. My name is Morgan Robertson. I am a certified Salesforce developer and Sales Cloud consultant. I'll be hosting your training today as we explore Visualforce using the standard controller. A few items of housekeeping. First of all of you have been added in listen-only mode. If you have a question or an issue, please use the chat box in order to communicate with me. I have limited screen real estate today, so that's the one that I have available to see your comments. And if you do have a question, let me know in that location, and I'd be happy to unmute you and we can discuss whatever issues you're having. I like to have a bit more interaction in my webinars. And so if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, or if you need me to slow down or review an element. So today, let's go ahead and just so you know, this session will also be recorded and posted to our website for your later review. Alrighty, so to get started, today we're going to be talking about Visualforce, and Visualforce is the view engine that Salesforce uses to display all of their pages. It is a framework around the It is a framework around HTML that provides us with several tools to make the development easier and to use several pre-built tools that they have available. I'll be working in a professional edition org today. Just so you know, the things that I'm doing today with the standard controllers and Visualforce are available on almost all editions of Salesforce. You can use Visualforce in Contact Edition all the way through Performance Edition. So there's some real power here that Salesforce has given us. Now, to get started, I'm going to assume that you have some experience with HTML and XML and understand the system of tags and attributes that are there. If any of you have any questions, please let me know. So we're going to start here on the setup page of this professional edition org. If you come down here under develop and pages, this is where you create those Visualforce pages. Visualforce pages can be used to replace the standard user interface of Salesforce. They can be used to host custom actions in Enterprise and the Performance Edition organizations. You can write a custom controller or a custom Apex that will interact with your Visualforce page to do some fairly advanced things. There are many examples of very, very good Visualforce. One that is of note is the Dell website. It's actually run off of Visualforce and interacts with their Salesforce instance. So if you sit there, of course that's not going to be simple out of the box, but it is definitely possible, and Visualforce can make it so. Now let's go ahead and create a new page by clicking on new, giving it a label. The label we're going to give it is the standard control demo. And there is a slight bug on this page where you need to make sure that the API name listed second here has no spaces in it. Usually by default it clear that, but in this case it didn't. We're going to go ahead and do a quick save there. Oop, that's where I came from. Okay, go ahead and do a quick save. Alrighty. Now, the usual frameworks for interfacing with Visualforce, you can use the standard edit pages. However, Salesforce has created two other locations. The first is the developer console, but the second, and probably the most useful that I've found, is the actual, it's called development mode. If you come under manage users and users, and you look, you have edit access to your user profile. Over here on the right hand side you'll see development mode and show view state in development mode. Development mode is a nice little integrated environment where as you'll see, you can edit the HTML, the controller code if you're using a custom controller or extension, and inspect the view state, or the state of the form variables that are being passed back and forth to and from the Salesforce servers. In order to access a Visualforce page, you take your root, the root of your Salesforce instance, in this case na10.salesforce.com, and the URI is /apex/ and then the API name of the particular element that you're looking at. So clicking here, this takes us to the vanilla page that we were presented with earlier. Congratulations, this is your new page. You notice this bar down here at the bottom. This is the development mode that I mentioned. As we expand this up, you'll see that I have the code for my page. Also along here you'll get any of the controllers and extensions that you may be using. Custom controllers and extensions are a little beyond the scope of what we'll be discussing today. However, I hope that you'll tune into some of the coming webinars that will cover those topics. In this development mode, I can come in here and I can edit the text and say this is the adjusted Visualforce page. I can edit and save inline. It will refresh the page to show me exactly what it is that I'm doing. This is very, very helpful in augmenting and adjusting what you're doing within Visualforce. Now, a few of the basic attributes. If you're interested in all the elements, this component reference here can be opened up. A very good reference guide for all of the elements and tags that are available in Visualforce. I'll be going over a few of the major ones, but you can find more information about what is available and what attributes they have that are configurable in this element reference. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a standard controller. This standard controller gives me access not only to a particular record within Salesforce, but also gives me certain actions that I can perform. By default, it would be a view-only page in regards to the Salesforce data, unless we had access to either the standard controller or a custom controller. The standard controller is defined by the name of the object, and today we're going to be building one on the opportunity object. Go ahead and save that. Now you notice that this doesn't change anything. The standard controller actually will not assume new record creation unless it is passed an ID. So up here in the URL, we add a question mark ID, and let me switch into one of the other orgs and grab this ID here. By passing that ID in, our Visualforce page now knows what record it's supposed to be interacting with. It goes and it pulls the required fields from that record and will display them on the page. Now for a little bit of fun. A few other attributes on this top-level Apex page. If you wanted to create a page that only performed a specific action, that is possible by defining an action here at the top level that we'll call a Visualforce method, and can actually render the page redirect away immediately. This is often used for custom development when you want a button-click event. If you are using any custom extensions, you add the extensions tag and add a comma separated list. But in this case, we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the defaults that Salesforce has. You notice by default on this page we have the standard styles, we've got the sidebar and header. If I put in the show header as false, I lose the header and the sidebar. Go ahead and adjust that back to true. The sidebar element will automatically collapse or refresh the sidebar. Put that back to true. We can have show chat, which is not running on the page because we don't have the detail page up. The last is the standard style sheets. This standard style sheets tag tells the Visualforce rendering engine whether or not to include the standard CSS. Now, by default, if you have the header, it requires the style sheets. But with these elements false, it will remove all those standard stylings so that we get a truly vanilla page that is strictly HTML. And then we can implement our own styles on top of that. In this case, we're going to be using these standards. So the first tag that I'm going to show you is quite simple. It's Apex detail. This tag simply renders the detail page as it is shown on the page layout. You'll notice it includes all the related lists from the default layout and looks almost exactly similar. A few of the elements that you can adjust here. You can turn related lists off. For example, I can also use related hover lifts. True. We want the related hover lists off. You'll notice that those links at the top that give you quick access to the related list below are prevented. I can also take inline editing and enable or disable it. So if I wanted this to be a view-only instance of the detail page, I can configure that as well. Alrighty. And lastly, but not least, we can have the show chatter. As you notice on the standard Salesforce pages, you have this chatter feed here that can be shown and hid. This can be removed, as we see in the original page. So that's the detail tag. Somewhat useful, but we're going to actually break it up and build this ourselves. So what I'm going to do is introduce a new tag, the Apex page block tag. In an Apex, and actually before that, as an Apex form tag. In order to use any sort of input in Salesforce, you need to place it within a form. The difference between this type of a form and a standard Salesforce or and a standard HTML form is that this actually does not have a particular action defined. The action will be defined by the method on the command button that we place rather than on the form as a whole. So we've got the page block here. Within this, you can give it a title, opportunity detail, and you can also give it an ID. If you're working in JavaScript, these IDs are important because every page block section item, elements will append their IDs to the ID of elements contained within them in order to enforce uniqueness on the page. So if you do not define an ID, it will be a system-generated ID and can make JavaScript interactions difficult. What you'll see is down here we have this new page block section, or this new page block with the title opportunity detail. Within this, I'm going to add an Apex page block and add Apex messages first. This is the location where you will find any error messages rendered, error confirmation messages, anything that's attached to that standard controller. So, for example, if you have a validation rule that fails on a record edit, that error would appear in Apex messages if it's defined to appear at the top of the page. The next we're going to add is an Apex page block buttons. These define the buttons that you see listed here at the top and the bottom. And this is one thing where the standard controller comes to help quite a bit. So in this case, I'm going to use the command button with the action parameter. This action parameter is defined on many elements, and it interfaces with the controller, in this case the standard controller. In order to access data on the standard controller, data or methods, we need to use curly braces with an exclamation point. This is the notation used that tells Visualforce there will be a method or some sort of controller interaction inside of this. So here we're going to call the save method. I'm going to give a value to the button of save, and that will render our opportunity detail with the save button. You notice that it is by default put at both top and bottom. Under the page block buttons there is a location. If I wanted it, for example, only at the bottom, and I could spell bottom right, it'll appear only in the bottom location. I'm also going to place the command button with the action of cancel. And also the quick save. That's one that we find very often is used. Now you might be asking, how can I redirect these buttons? It can be done using parameters in the URL string. If you use the variable save URL and then use a URL encoded string of where the next page is you want to go. So if I wanted to go back to the home page, /home/home.jsp, I would need to URL encode this, which means escaping these characters to their ASCII comparisons %2f for a slash. For example, if I wanted to return to the parent record, it would be %2f and then the ID of the opportunity. If you, on our website, there's a segment on custom buttons where you can find some, in that webinar, you'll find more information about setting those types of parameters. So we have the save URL, and there's return URL, and there's cancel URL. Return URL is somewhat of a generic action that these other actions fall back to if it is not present. And that is supposed to be an ampersand, just by way of information. Alrighty. So we've got our command buttons. The next thing that we need to make is our sections. So Apex page block section. This is just like adding a section to a page layout. So I can default whether it's collapsible. It's got the little arrows there. Again, I can give it an ID. Also, I can define a number of columns. By default, Salesforce only permits 1 and 2 in their page layouts. In this case, I could make it 3 or 4, or whichever value that I would choose. I'm going to go ahead and do a 2-column layout. Let's also give it a title. Opportunity information. So you'll see that we have the default styling. Inside of this, I'm going to place several what are called page block section items. This defines each of these individual locations, reading left to right, top to bottom, across all of the columns of the section. Inside of a page block section item, you can have up to 2 children. So in the most common, you'll have a label tag and some other type of a tag. So for example, we can do owner, Apex. I'm going to have this be an output field. This output field tag is very useful. It will actually read the value bound to it and adjust its data type to the field defined. You define which field is bound to using the value tag. Again, we use our curly braces with the exclamation point and say opportunity.owner. In this case, opportunity.owner ID. And we see that now we have that link to the owner of this record. I'm going to add a few more of these. And we'll do close date. And we'll also do the name. In this case, I'm going to change this to an input field as an example. And also show you that I can also do an input text or other data types as well. This will be the name. Other data types that are available include you include checkboxes and radios for inputs. You can also do a hidden, which will by default hide the field but include it on the page. The secret can be used for passwords. It will hide the actual characters and replace them with asterisk, the star characters. A text area is a long text area such as a description field. And finally, you can also do a select. Select checkboxes, lists, and select options to select radio. This one you may need to use a controller extension in order to get the select options if you want that list to be dynamic. If you want it to be static, you would do, for example, a select list, and then define as children of that select list, you would need to define every select option tag. Save that. And as you can see, we have the owner, the close date. It's adjusted it immediately to be a date type field. And here we have this defined as strictly a text input. Alrighty. Another very exciting thing that we can do inside of this is that with one of the beauties of using Visualforce is that we can actually use our dot notation to get across objects. Page block section. And we're going to title this account information. And the page block section item. And this type we're going to go account or opportunity.account.name. Account is the name of the relationship, not necessarily the name of the field, though often it corresponds. If you're using standard relationships, it will be the name of the field. If you're using a custom, instead of the API name being __C, use __R in order to navigate across that relationship. We're going to go ahead and put an account name there. And when we refresh, we should see Salesforce.com coming right there. Now, unfortunately, you can't edit that other field across on the other object, but you can pull it into view. So these are most often done in output text values, used for more display purposes rather than input purposes. One other very nice feature that we have within this is also using what's called the render tag. Page block section. In this, this render tag will tell the Visualforce engine whether this page actually needs to appear or not. Now, inside of here, instead of just simply putting a true or a false, in Visualforce I can actually use the majority of my formula fields that I have on when I'm creating a formula field in Salesforce. So I can do a statement in here and say opportunity.stagename equals closed one, then render true, otherwise false, and close that. And inside of here, text, output text, game over. Now on this output text, I can use the escaped value in order to place HTML inside of the output text. So if I wanted to, for example, make it bold without having to use CSS styling, Did I spell it correctly? Oh, it's escape, not escaped. I apologize. Go. We'll notice that currently the record's not there. If I come up here and I'm going to change the stage from it needs analysis, so I didn't let anything on there. Let's go ahead and add it. I'm going to add stage name. And this is going to be close date. Oh, we already have close date up there. I'm going to adjust that one. So we've got the stage name here. Let's go ahead and change this to closed one and save it. Notice because I didn't have that save URL, by default it went back to the opportunity page rather than to my Apex page. You'll notice that now, refresh it. That is one item on the development mode, is that when you click back, make sure not to save immediately because your changes will not be there because it re-renders from the cache rather than from the browser. And this has game over, which was the tag that we wanted rendered because of that if statement. That can be very, very powerful in helping you to create custom logic within your Visualforce page. So let's see. For a moment. The last thing I wanted to review was oh, I can do that on activity. Okay. If we are building this ourselves, we can actually still include the related lists. So here below this last page block section, Apex, data table, which will create the table for us and give us quite a few things for free. We don't have to actually build out ourselves in Salesforce or in the HTML. I define a value. This has to be a controller element, and it's going to be opportunity dot tasks. You notice that as I navigate downward in the tree, going from an opportunity that has many related tasks, I simply add an S to the name of the standard list. If this were to be a child custom lookup relationship from another object to the opportunity, it would be defined in the setup menu. It's when you are creating it, it asks for the child relationship name, and that's where this is used, is to navigate downward from the parent to the child. I also need to include a val element, which defines what it will call a singular element. I used data table before. Oh, sorry, page block table. I thought I'd used the other. Value, oh, it's not val, it's var. That's why. I apologize for that. And I wish I could spell. There we are. You notice that it rendered the page walk table, this line right there. However, it does not have any defined columns yet. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to bring these columns over from the example that I prepared earlier.
I am. I wanted to basically see if you're available tomorrow, and then I guess it's part 2 of the equation. I don't know if you've had any conversation with Nish. No, I haven't. But what I was hoping for is if you guys want to go to lunch today, I'd buy it. One of the things I would like to
So you notice we don't have any tasks at the moment, but we have the column task name. This column didn't have a header value. Activity date. You'll see now that it renders both of those columns there, and any elements that are required are included down below. By defining a column in this way, I can place any sort of content within it. In the column, I can also use a value and define it that way. So I could do act owner in that manner, and do it as a single tag if necessary. There it is. So you see up here, my alignment was off. There we go. So we have the task name, which has it done in line. We have the owner.
I don't know if there's a chance for you and Nish to chat today. I've been trying not to bother him because it's
There we go. And we have all three appearing. And we have the activity date. A trick about rendering dates and formats is to use the output text and nest it with a parameter, or place the value that you want rendered inside the param tag, and to use your Java date format notation inside of the value of the output. This will allow it to render appropriately. Let's see. Let me just double check to make sure there weren't any other items that I wanted to make sure that I covered. Okay. So those are the basics of Visualforce with a standard controller. It allows you to create a custom user interface, collect information from different locations, customize the interaction. Also of note is that JavaScript is fair game. Any sort of JavaScript that you'd like to use on this page can be included, including if you want to use JavaScript to call address verification services or other elements. That is completely configurable. The only restriction is that if you want to interact with the actual data, it needs to be done with the either the Ajax toolkit, which is a JavaScript library available for those that have the API enabled, or with a custom controller or controller extension, or through the standard controller, of course, as we've been discussing. So I appreciate your time and your attention, and hope that this has given you an idea of what Visualforce can do with just using a standard controller. So something available to all editions of Salesforce. Now I'd like to open it up for any questions that you may have, and thank you for being here. So the date format that I just used, it's defined by Salesforce. You give it a default value, the type, and then it uses Java date format. So lowercase y is for year, capital M is for month, lowercase d is for day. If I were to do 3 M's rather than 2, that would put in the 3-letter month. 2 M's does a 2-number month. And it interacts in that way. You can also include the time information, time zone information. All of that is also collected within Salesforce. Yes, I can change the order to be any that I'd prefer. I could do day.month.year. I can do just month and year with a hyphen, and that will render it as appropriate. Let's see. The only exception is that if you use a slash character, you need to escape it by replacing or by placing it within single quote tags. Alrighty, I'd like to thank you all for being here and wish you best of luck on your Visualforce endeavors.